Alright, so now we're on to the Russian guns, and this is probably going to be a little bit of a long video as well, but I don't know. I think that's mostly just going to be because there's not really a 75mm gun in the Russian tech tree that I can just skip over. Um, However, they don't have quite as many guns to go over as the Germans do, thank God. So, the first gun that we're going to have a look at is the PV-1 machine gun. It is on the I-15s, all of the I-15s, and the I-16 Chung 28 in the Chinese tech tree. The rate of fire is going to be 750 rounds a minute across the board, which is pretty slow for a 30 caliber machine gun, and kind of contributes to this gun not really being all that great. If this were 1,000 rounds a minute, it would be pretty decent. However, or if it was a 50 cal, 750 rounds a minute would be pretty good. However, 750 rounds a minute for a 30 cal is kind of on the slow side. And by kind of, I mean very. I think that's actually the slowest for a 30 cal, at least mounted on an aircraft in the game. So, not very good. The ammo loads are kind of a mess on the I-16, the Chung 28 in the Chinese tree. Like I said, it is going to have 900 rounds per gun. The I-15s, the reserve I-15s, are going to have 750 rounds. And then the I-15 BIS is going to have 425 rounds in the lower two guns. So if we're looking at it, these two guns here on the I-15 BIS have 425 rounds. The upper two guns, so these two here, have 1,100 rounds. So pretty significant disparity there. And you are probably going to feel that when you're flying it. As far as the belts go, they are pretty good across the board. The default belt is kind of middling. You have a tracer, a ball, an API, and 3 AI, which is, you remember from the last video, is just a glorified HE round. The uni belt is tracer, API, 2 AI, and an API-T. Tracers is all API-T. And the stealth belt is 3 API and 2 AI. As far as what you want to load, it is entirely dependent on your personal preference. However, the two options are stealth and tracers. The AI round is basically just a glorified API. Like, it doesn't really do anything different from the API, aside from that it just doesn't penetrate. In terms of damage on like the overall structure of the plane, it's basically the same as the API as you saw there. The muzzle velocity is 815 meters a second, which is pretty good. However, it is a little bit slower than the API-T at 765 meters per second. So yeah, it kind of depends, again, on what you want to load, what you feel comfortable with. And actually the API is 818 meters per second right there. So if you decide to run tracers, you're going to be shooting a little bit lower than you will with stealth. However, like I said, it is entirely dependent on what you want to run. These guns shoot fairly well. You don't really have to put in a whole lot of lead in order to hit with them. And regardless, it is a 30 caliber machine gun, so the effective range is about 500 meters, or, well, that's kind of the upper limit of the effective range. The effective range is about 300 meters, I would say. You don't really want to be firing outside of that. So, to go ahead and show you what that looks like, here we go with the demonstration. Alright, so the PV-1 30 caliber machine guns. Not really the greatest, honestly. Having 4 of them on all of the planes that you get this gun on, at least with the exception of the Chung 28 in the I-16 Chung 28 in the Chinese tech tree, definitely makes up for a lot of their shortcomings. The primary shortcoming being just the rate of fire is way too low. 750 rounds per minute is very, very, very low, especially considering that the shkas that you're about to get is so much higher. That shortcoming is made up for the fact, however, by, again, that you have 4 of these guns, and the ammo load is fairly good, as well as the belts. Having a lot of API stuffed in there is very, very, very good. On top of that, of course, the ballistics are absolutely phenomenal. So it's very easy to aim these guns, and when you do get guns on target, you are going to get hits very reliably, and they are going to have very good chances of starting fires and the like. You will struggle with breaking wings and whatnot off of planes a little bit, at least against some of the more durable stuff, like you can see like a BF-109 here. You're going to struggle with killing these things quickly. However, the biplanes are really not going to be that much of an issue. So overall, good guns, just the rate of fire leaves a little bit to be desired. Alright, so here we go with the far more well-known of the 2 Russian 30 caliber machine guns, the shkas 7.62mm machine gun, which is basically what would happen if you decided to take 7.62mm rim and put it inside of a gas-operated machine gun with some kind of weird helical feed system. If you haven't actually looked up the shkas machine gun, it is actually a fairly interesting system. I would highly recommend giving it a quick look, although there is not a whole lot of documentation about it in English. So before I go yapping on about the intricacies of this weird little gun, what is it mounted on? Well, it's mounted on the I-16, with the exception of the Chung 28 from the previous segment. So the Type 5, the Type 10, the Type 18, the Type 17, the Type 24, the Type 27, and the Type 28. It's also mounted on the I-153M62, so that's all of the Chaikas with the exception of the, or all of the I-153s, I should say, with the exception of the I-153P. It's on the SU-2, the P-3, the P-3 early, the MiG-315, as well as the 315BK, the Yak-1, 2, and 4, the IL-2s, the IL-8, and the IL-10. The standard IL-10, the 1946, does not have these guns. The I-180S, the SU-6, the I-29, the Tandem Mai, and the SU-8. So you're mostly going to get this gun at tiers 1 and 2. However, you are going to see it a few times at tiers 3 and 4. So yeah, this is a pretty well spread out gun throughout the Russian tech tree. As far as the rate of fire goes, 1,800 rounds a minute, and as far as ammo loads go, it is a complete and utter nightmare. So 1,800 rounds a minute is really, 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 really quick. This is what makes this gun so well known, is just because the rate of fire is absolutely ridiculous. It's also why this gun jams so badly. Touch on the ammo loads here in a second, but you really are going to want to get the gun upgrade for this gun as soon as humanly possible, because it jams really badly when stock, and it really doesn't get any better when you get the gun upgrade. It's a little bit better, but if you hammer the trigger for too long, it is going to jam. So yeah, that out of the way, what is the ammo loads? Well, yeah, like I kind of said earlier, it's a complete and utter disaster. The I-16s here have 650 rounds in the nose and 900 rounds in the wings. No, the I-301, I forgot this gun. This plane has this gun as well, 650 rounds there. The IL-2s have 750 rounds per gun. The SU-2 has 850. And then, well, the Yak-1 has, the standard Yak-1, I should say, has, what is it, 620 rounds per gun. The Yak-2 has 500. And if I go into any more detail, we'll be here for half an hour. So yeah, basically every single plane has a different ammo load, and some of them have more than one ammo load. So yeah. As far as the belts go, they are a little bit different from the PV1. The tracer is, or the default is tracer, 2 ball, 1 API, 1 AI. Uni is API, AI, API-T. Tracers are API, API-T, so half API, half API-T. Stealth is 3 API, and 1 AI. As far as the ballistics, they are the exact same as the PV1 because they are firing the exact same round, 7.62 by 15 by 54 millimeter rimmed, the same round that is fired by the Mosin Nagant. So yeah, the ballistics are all exactly the same. So still very easy to shoot with. The main upgrade is going to be the rate of fire, and then obviously you have slightly different belts. As far as what to load with this gun, either stealth or tracers, it kind of depends on what you are comfortable with. I don't really think that there's really a difference between either of them. This gun is really, really, really good for setting fires, killing pilots, damaging engines, that sort of thing. But before I ramble on too much, let's go ahead and look at it in practice. Alright, so the shkas 7.62mm machine gun in the wild, it is definitely a massive improvement over the PV1, and, well, despite basically everything about, well, everything except for the rate of fire being basically the same as the PV1, the belts are slightly different, the ballistics are the same because the ammo is firing is the same. The time on target, or the time to, or the ammo loads are fairly similar. They're a little bit better. Well, they're a little bit better than the some of the guns, at least on the I-15 BIS. But they're still fairly decent. Like, you know, over 600 rounds for most of the planes that get these guns. But of course, the main factor is just 1,800 rounds a minute rate of fire. It's over double the rate of fire from the PV1, and you are definitely going to feel it. The amount of ammo that you're going to use is going to be fairly similar to the PV1 to kill something like a BF-109, as you see here. However, the time to kill is far, far lower, just simply because you just fire so much faster that you get so much more rounds on target. So, yeah, the time to kill is going to be far, far, far lower, and just your ability to pump rounds into somebody until they finally die is just what makes these guns as amazing as they are. Alright, so now that we've got the 30 cals out of the way, let's go ahead and look at the Russian 50 cal, the Berezin UB machine gun, or Berezin UBS heavy machine gun, 12.7 millimeters in caliber. Rate of fire is a little bit weird. There are two different rates of fire that are available for this gun. On the fighters, generally you're going to have 1,000 rounds a minute, and on the ground attackers and bombers, you are going to have 1,030. One exception to that being the Hurricane Mark IIB, the Premium Hurricane, which is going to have a rate of fire of 1030 as well. As far as what planes get this gun, the Hurricane Mark IIB, the I-301 is shown here, the I-180S, the Log 3, the Yak-1B, 379T-K and U, the Merca in the Swedish tech tree, the P3, all of the P2s with the exception of the P2-1, so the first one, as well as both MiG-315s, the 315 and the BK. As far as ammo loads go, it is a complete and utter nightmare. Just a couple of mentions here. The P3 BIS has two different ammo loads. They have 265 in one gun, 235 in the other. I-180S is 220. The I-301 is 210. The MiG-315 has 280 in the nose for the standard MiG-315. The BK has 280 in the nose, 145 in the pods. The Lag 3s and the Yaks, with the exception of the Yak 3 and the 9U, all have 200 rounds a gun. The Yak 3 has 150, the 9U has 170. The Merca, if you decide to run the Berezin in that thing, which you really shouldn't, has 230 rounds. And the P2s and P3s have 150 rounds, with the exception of the standard P3, which has 250. So, yeah, the ammo loads are all over the place. I probably forgot a few here and there, but that's the general overview. As far as the belts are concerned, the default belt is Tracer 2 AP and 1 IAI. Uni is 1 API, 1 APIT, and 2 IAI. Air targets is 1 APIT, 2 API, and 1 IAI. The ground is 1 APIC, 2 API, 1 APIT, and 1 IAI. Tracers is all APIT. Stealth is 2 API and 1 IAI. As far as what do we want to load, Uni? Unless you're going to go after ground, which in that case I guess load ground, but to be honest, if you're going to go after ground targets, you could get away with using tracer, stealth, air, or ground. It really doesn't matter. Yes, the APIC has a higher penetration, but it doesn't matter because there is 1 round in 5, and 1 round is a HE round. So you have 4 armor-piercing rounds, and 1 of them might go through a little bit more armor than the other ones. So tracers would probably be the best for ground attack, but it really doesn't matter. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of difference felt between all 3 of these belts. If you're going to go after planes, though, load Uni. And the reason why, well, before we get onto that, let's go ahead and look at the ballistics. So the APIT is 865 meters a second, API is 820, and the IAI is 860 meters per second with 2 grams of explosive filler at 3.23 grams TNT equivalent. So the same, if you remember, as the German 15 millimeter from the previous video. The difference, though, is that instead of having a rate of fire of 700 rounds a minute, this has a rate of fire of 1,000 rounds per minute, which is a quite decent improvement. And means that instead of just kind of plinking away at an enemy, you're going to actually do a pretty decent amount of damage with this HE round. And that, well, if you remember, like I said, this is a 50 caliber round with a higher rate of fire and the same HE filler as that 15. So this is going to do quite a bit of damage. And even just having the 1 gun in the case of most of the yaks, you are still going to be able to do fairly decently if you have good enough aim. Just be careful because, of course, as is universal with the Russian tech tree, the ammo loads for the 50 cals and the 20 mils is not that great. Well, at least for the 50 cals, it's not that great. For the 20 mils, it could be better. It could be a lot worse, though. And, well, before I ramble on too much, let's go ahead and show you what this actually looks like. Alright, so the 50 caliber berezin machine gun out in the wild, definitely a candidate for one of the best 50 caliber machine guns in the game. However, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. The ballistics are amazing, the rate of fire is spectacular, the damage is just absolutely spectacular as well. However, like with a lot of Russian guns or a lot of Russian planes, it's not so much the gun that's the problem, it's just the design of the aircraft. So you usually have about 200 rounds per gun, especially on the yaks, and sometimes less, which is not ideal. And you are definitely going to feel that given how high of a rate of fire you have. So this ammo that you have, this already very limited ammo load, is going to go very quickly. Now you can do very well with it, like you can see here in this clip. However, it can be unreliable at times. So it is a very good gun, but you need to be careful and you need to make your shots count because you don't have a lot of ammo and it goes very quickly. Alright, so here we go with the first of the Russian 20 mils, the shvak. So this is going to be a gun that you are going to get painfully familiar with by the end of the Russian tech tree. However, there are 2 different belt options for this gun. The early belts, as I'll call them, are on the I-16 Type 27, the Type 28, the Type 17, which is the Chinese tech tree, as well as the I-153P. So all of the planes that get these early belts are going to have a rate of fire of 800 rounds per minute and 150 rounds in the gun. As far as the belts go, it could be a lot better. The default belt is Tracer HE, so half Tracer, half HE, which is okay. It could be better, it could be worse. Air targets is HEF, HEFI, HEF Tracer, so 3 HE and a Tracer. Tracers is Tracer, HE, and 2 Tracers, which is pretty shit. Stealth is all high explosive fragmentation, all HE. As far as what you want to load, either air or stealth, depending on how competent you are with your aim. As far as the ballistics go, well, the tracer, I think all of these, they're all 800 meters per second with the all 800 meters per second for the velocity. The HEFI has 3 grams of explosive mass with a 4.3 gram TNT equivalent, which is not great. And then you have the HEF round, which has an explosive mass of 4 grams with a TNT equivalent of 5.8, which is, I think, off the top of my head, the same round that the regular shvak belts get. However, that is still not exactly the greatest in the world. However, you really aren't going to notice that because it does actually still do fairly decently despite having such a low HE filler. Especially if you're shooting at something light like this, it's going to, well, like you saw there, completely shred it. Despite having such a low HE filler, the shvaks actually do fairly well, which we'll get into a little bit more detail in a second. But first, let's go ahead and show you what these early belts look like. All right, so the early shvak belts out in the wild, how are they? They're decent. They are not as reliable as the later shvak belts, unfortunately, though. They still will do well, however, not having that fragmentation incendiary round that we're going to see on the normal shvak belts, you can definitely feel it. The high explosive round in this belt works, but the only real reason why it works is because you have a very good muzzle velocity, and you have a rate of fire of 800 rounds a minute, which for a 20mm cannon is absolutely stupid. So yeah, it works, but it can leave a lot to be desired sometimes. Of course, you do have 150 rounds per gun, which is very good. But yeah, again, you have 800 rounds a minute rate of fire and very decent velocity. So if you prefer your high rate of fire guns, this is definitely going to be one of them for you. It definitely does do work, but it can sometimes leave a little bit to be desired that the later belts are going to make up for. Alright, so now we get onto the regular shvak belts. These are going to be the ones that you're going to see pretty much all over the place. And, well, for starters, what are you going to get these belts and this gun on? Well, you're going to get it on the Yak 1, 2, 7, 9, the 9B, the U, and the 3. So most of the Yaks in the game. You're also going to get it on the Log 3 with the exception of the Log 334. You're going to get it on the I-29, the Hurricane, the LA-5 and 7, the standard LA-7, the I-185, the I-225, the P-3, BIS, the TISMA, and the ITP. So, a lot of planes get this gun. Also the MiG-334 and the, the IL-2 1941 and the IL-2 M82. So the first of the IL-2s you get and the premium tier 2 IL-2 also get this gun. So yeah, a lot of planes get this gun. As for the rate of fire, there are 2 very similar to the berezin. There is an 800 round a minute rate of fire, which is going to be on most of the planes that you'll see. However, there is also a 720 rounds per minute rate of fire, which is going to be on the LA5, the LA7, the I-185, and the I-225. Everything else is going to have 800 rounds per minute. As for what the ammo loads are, it is a complete mess. Most of the Yaks are going to have 120 rounds. However, the Yak 1 is going to have 110, and that's only the first Yak 1. The Yak 1B has 120. The ITP here has 200 rounds. The LA5 and 7 have 170 rounds. The I-29 has 120 as well. The Tisma and the Yak 2 have 150. The Hurricane has 150. The I-225 has 100. The MiG-334 has 200 rounds. And then the I-185 is a complete and utter mess. I think it's... if we're looking at it from the top down, it's 140 in the left gun, 170 in the right gun, and 250 in the centerline gun. So yeah, complete mess for the ammo. As far as the belts are concerned, the default belt is pretty decent. It is half FIT, half API. Uni is FIT, HE, API, FIT. Ground is HE, FIT, API. Tracers is all FIT. Armored targets is API, FIT, API, or 2 API. Stealth is API, 2 HE, and 1 FI. As far as what you want to load, tracers. This isn't really a good gun for ground attack, as you could probably see by the penetration tables there. Yeah, not really the greatest in the world, but as far as killing planes go, it is very, very good. Now, in spite of how low that HE filler looks, which, there you go right there, 800 meters per second for the velocity, 4.13 grams of TNT, 363 grams TNT equivalent, or 413 grams of explosive mass, 636 grams TNT equivalent. In spite of how low that looks, these guns actually are fairly hard hitting. Most of the time, if you hit a fighter with them, it's going to be 1 to 2 hits and it'll take it down. A couple more than that, and you'll kill pretty much everything else in the game. So for the most part, these guns do fairly well. The rate of fire is pretty high, so you do have to watch your trigger a little bit. However, you do have some decent ammo loads to go along with it. So there's some trade-offs with this gun. However, overall, they are fairly strong. So go ahead and show you what it looks like. Let's go ahead and go into the demonstration. All right, so the upgraded shvak belts, how are these in comparison to the early ones? Well, they are definitely an improvement. Having just that little bit of extra HE filler combined with the frag round being a tracer as well means that you don't really have to worry about potentially sacrificing damage in order to be able to aim your gun, at least in realistic or sim. As far as the damage output goes, it is a little bit more reliable than the early belts. However, they are still not MG151s, to keep that in mind. You do still have a very low HE filler, only about 5 grams TNT equivalent, which is pretty much the lowest that you're going to be getting shot back at by. On average, the planes that are going to be shooting back at you with 20 mils are going to be shooting back at you with 8, 10, or more, depending on at least what you fight for the most part. As far as the overall stats of the gun, well, it still does have the same high velocity, high muzzle, or high rate of fire, and it does still have a fairly decent range. So overall, the gun is very good. Just do remember that your high rate of fire does mean that you are going to chew through what little ammo that you do have, especially on the Yaks, very, very quickly. Having 2 guns, like here on the LA5 or the LA7 or 185, or 3 in that case, is definitely ideal to having only the one of the Yaks, at least for the most part. However, again, it is still not an MG151. These will still let you down on occasion. Overall, about one hit on the wing sometimes, usually about 3, 4, 5 will bring down most fighters. Bombers will usually take a bit more. Alright, so thank you, Gaijin, for deciding to change the IL-2's guns, or the VYA-23 in the most recent patch, despite the fact that you literally haven't touched it for the better part of over a fucking decade now. And you basically changed something that I guarantee has been a bug report for the better part of the last decade. So thank you. Anyway, for those of you watching the video, the VOA and the PTB-23, and for those of you who don't know what the hell I'm rambling about, well, kind of like what I said in the last video, I had all of these videos recorded and ready to go, and then Gaijin decided they were going to announce this patch, and in that patch they announced they were going to change this gun and the Hispanos. So yeah, thank you. Anyway, 600 rounds per minute rate of fire is the rate of fire of both the VYA and the PTB. The PTB is only available on the I-301 that you can see down here. And by the way, if you are looking at it and thinking, oh wow, that's that one overpowered plane from way back in the day, right? No, not really. Maybe in realistic and sim. In arcade, no. And to be honest with you, even in sim, I would also say no. It has been kind of clobbered to death over the years, as justifiably so. Anyway, as far as what guns or what planes you get this gun on, you're going to get it on, well, obviously the PTB on the I-301, the TU-1, the SU-6, the premium one, the SU-6 AM-42, which is the tech tree one with the inline engine. I think it's actually the first one. You're also going to get it on the IL-2 1942, which is the one in my lineup down there, and well, actually the one I've got up. The IL-2 1943, the IL-2M, and the IL-10, the first IL-10, not the 1946. So yeah, a fair number of planes are going to get this gun. As far as ammo loads go, the TU-1 is 130, the I-301 is 81, as you can see right here by the stat card. The SU-6, the premium one, is 115. The tech tree one, the AM-42, is 120. And the IL-2 and IL-10 both have 150 rounds per gun. As far as the belts go, default is FIT API, so 2 FIT and 2 API. Uni is FI, FIT API, and armor targets is 3 AP and 1 FIT. As far as you want to load, if you're going after planes, I'd say just load Uni. If you're going after ground targets, then load default. Probably you could load armored, but I'd personally just go with default, so that way if I come up against a fighter, I don't have to worry about trying to kill him with API. I can just make sure that I've got, or I can feel safe knowing I've got 2 HE rounds basically coming out of these things. Which, if you hit somebody with one of those FIT rounds, they are going to die. Anyway, as for the ballistics and also the explosive filler, well, the ballistics are pretty simple. It's basically 900 meters per second across the board, which is absolutely stupid, and makes these guns very, very, very easy to aim. As far as the HE filler, well, you just saw the FIT, but we're going to do the FI first. It is 15.6 grams of explosive mass, 24 grams TNT equivalent. And, well, if you recall the belts real quick, you'll know that this is basically only on the uni belt anymore. And then the FIT, which is the other round that you're going to get, is 11 grams of explosive mass and the 17 grams TNT equivalent. This is going to look very familiar when we get to the NS-23 because it is the same gun, or it's the same shell, actually. So, yeah. The only difference is that this has a much higher velocity than the NS-23, but the explosive mass is exactly the same. So, yeah. It really hasn't affected the overall performance of this gun, however. maybe if you're loading default, you'll see a bit of a difference. If you're loading uni, though, it really hasn't changed a whole lot of anything. It still basically one-shots everything that it come acrosses because it's still 17 grams of TNT. If you hit somebody with that, they're going to die, and it doesn't really matter. As a result, we're going to go ahead and go into the demonstration footage, but it is the original demo footage that I recorded because, like I said, basically nothing's changed. Alright, so the VYA/PTB 23mm cannon. The rate of fire is fairly decent. It's on the, well, it's kind of on the lower side, but I'm personally fine with it. On the i301 here, it can be a little bit, underwhelming at times. However, of course, as long as you get so much as a one hit, whatever you're shooting at dies, so it doesn't really matter. Of course, for the most part, you're going to see this gun on the IL-2 in the form of the VYA, and that gun is completely and utterly stupid. As long as you get so much as one hit, of course, everyone knows if you fly an IL-2 or if you fight an IL-2, as soon as the IL-2 looks at you, if you manage to hit you, you die. I-301 really is no different. But yeah, the ballistics are absolutely amazing. The shells are amazing. Overall, this is a pretty amazing gun. There's really nothing I can say that's bad about this gun, other than well, I wish they put it on the Yak-1 or the LA-5 instead of only the IL-2. But well, hey, that's a dream that we can have. But yeah, very, very good gun. Alright, and now we go on to the NS-23, the little brother to the NR-23 on the MiG-15s and whatnot. This gun has the same rate of fire as the previous two guns, 600 rounds per minute. And the planes that you're going to get it on the LA-9 and 11, as well as the IL-10 1946. And the Yak-9P and the Yak-9UT. And the UT is going to get it stock. The P, you're going to have to unlock it. If I pull up my Yak-9P real quick, where is it? Here it is. You can see you can unlock it here at Tier 2, and then the gun upgrade is at Tier 3. The belts are also at Tier 2. As for the ammo load, the LA-9, 11, and 9P all have 75 rounds per gun. The Yak-9UT has 80, and the IL-10 has 150. As far as the belts go, well, they're fairly similar to the VYA. Well, the default belt is the same as the VYA, although they've switched the order around, so it's APHE or APFI instead of FIAP. Armor targets is the same as the VYA, except they switched the order around a little bit, so it's FIT and 3 API instead of 3 API FIT. Air targets is 3 FIT and 1 API. Stealth is all API, and you shouldn't load it because this gun is not really all that great for shooting at ground targets, as you can kind of see just by looking at the penetration tables. As far as the ballistics go, it is a little bit worse than the VYA, as is the explosive filler. So the muzzle velocity across the board is 690 meters per second for both rounds, and the explosive mass 11 grams with a 17 gram TNT equivalent. Now, despite losing a good amount of HE filler, as you can kind of see right here, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to one-shot most of the fighters in the game. However, you are going to struggle a little bit against the bombers. You can still get some pretty decent kills with this gun against bombers. However, it's not going to be quite as reliable as it was with the VYA. So, let's go ahead and show you what this gun looks like in practice. Alright, so the NS-23 as opposed to the VYA or the PTB. Well, the VYA/PTB is a better gun. However, the NS is a lighter gun, so it's going to be in a lot more dedicated fighters than just the I-301, and it's not going to be in, ground attack aircraft like the IL-2, and you're not going to have two of them on the one occasion that it is in a ground attacker. The problems, well, you are going to miss the 900 meters per second muzzle velocity, or close enough to it. This loses 200 meters per second from that muzzle velocity that you loved so much on the VYA, and you are going to lose a fair amount of HE filler as well. You are going to feel that HE filler loss occasionally, however, this gun still does hit very, very hard. Only having one, as you can see here, does sometimes leave a little bit to be desired. However, even on just a bad angle for an HE round anyway, getting 2-3 hits on a fighter will pretty much seal its fate. If you get a good hit like that, one hit is more than enough. Against bombers, this gun is far more effective than the shvak. Most bombers will just disintegrate, especially if you shoot at them with the LA9 like this. So yeah, these guns hit very, very hard. The muzzle velocity is something to keep in mind, as well as the relatively limited ammo capacity. However, given the low rate of fire, 75 rounds can extend quite a long time. So yeah, overall, these are very, very good guns, and definitely an improvement over the shvak. Alright, and here we go with the first of the Russian 37mm cannons. This one I'm not going to do a demonstration on just because the belts and the ammunition that it fires are the exact same as the next gun we're going to have a look at. So yeah, I'm just going to touch on the rate of fire and the ammo load and one other thing with this one. And the gun in question is the SH-37 37mm cannon. It's only available on the ITP, as you see here. Has a rate of fire of 185 rounds a minute and 50 rounds in the magazine. One thing I'll mention is that this gun jams very, very quickly. So if you're fighting an ITP, or if you have an ITP, you're going to get about 7 rounds out of this gun before it jams. So keep that in mind. If you're fighting one of these things and you want to count the rounds for whatever reason, be my guest. But if he misses you with 7 rounds, he probably has already killed you with a 20 anyway, or should have anyway. So yeah, very quick little overview, and now let's go on to the next gun. All right, and now for the infamous fridge launcher, the NS-37 37mm cannon. Yeah, this is a fairly well-known gun within War Thunder for very good reason. The rate of fire is going to be 260 rounds a minute, and the planes that you're going to get it on, well, you're going to get it on, well, like I said, the infamous fridge launcher, the Ac-9T, the Lag 334, the Su-6, both of them, well, both of the tech tree ones, so the M71 and the AM42, as well as the IL-2-37 and the TISMA. So a couple of planes get up, not very many. Ammo loads, well, they're kind of all over the place, but the IL-2-37 gets 56 rounds, the 9T gets 30, the Lag 334 gets 36, the Su-6s get 45, and the TISMA gets 75. As for the belts, the default belt is AP-HE, so half AP, half HE. Air targets is all HE, armor targets is all AP. If you want to load, or if you want to go after ground targets, obviously there you go. Load the AP, and it's pretty good for that. There's no HE filler, however, the penetration is fairly good. As well as the muzzle velocity, the 880 meters per second is consistent for both rounds. And the HE filler for the HE round, 34 grams of HE filler at 52.36 grams TNT equivalent. So fairly decent, and is going to be able to one-shot most of the bombers in the game, let alone the fighters. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at this gun in practice. Yeah, so the NS-37, the infamous fridge launcher cannon, and well, it doesn't disappoint if you manage to hit something with it. The velocity is absolutely amazing. The stopping power is absolutely off the charts. The only thing that kind of leaves a little bit to be desired is going to be the rate of fire. However, of course, as long as you so much as hit something, whatever it happens to be, is usually going to be dead. You can sometimes hit bombers in a kind of weird spot and they'll survive, but basically, as long as you hit, basically any fighter, as long as you hit it, it's going to die. You might get a few, like you might hit something in like the wrong spot and it's just going to eat it, but it's probably going to be in, at least whatever section you hit is probably going to be in fairly bad shape, but that shouldn't happen nearly as much as it used to back in the day. Thank God for that. So yeah, pretty decent gun. Honestly, I think the planes that have it are a little bit overrated for the most part, but it's fairly good. Alright, so this plane should be looking kind of familiar. Yeah, we're back to the Yak-9UT, and we're back for the N37 37mm cannon. Similar in name to the NS, however, completely different in function. So for starters, the rate of fire is a lot better than the NS-37, 400 rounds per minute. 400 rounds a minute is, if you remember, almost the same as the MK103 30mm cannon in the German tech tree, which is pretty low by that kind of a gun standard, but for a 37mm, that's pretty darn good. Well, the planes that you're going to get this on, you're going to get it only on a couple of Yaks. You're going to get it on the Yak-9P, the Yak-9UT, as you see here, and the Yak-3T. The 3T is an old event plane that you cannot get anymore, I do not believe, unless they put it in the crates somewhere here. As far as the ammo loads go, the Yak-3T has 25 rounds. The other two, the 9P and the UT, have 28. So, ammo load, could be better, could be worse though. Especially with that rate of fire, actually, this ammo does kind of tend to go quickly, so you want to be careful when you are using this gun. As far as the belts go, the default belt is 2 HE and 1 API. Air is HEFIT, so high explosive tracer, and then 2 more standard HE. And then the API is, well, the armor targets is all API. Probably don't want to use this against ground targets though. As you can see, the muzzle velocity is kind of low, 675 meters per second, and the penetration is not very good. As far as the HE round goes, which is really what this thing is for, the HEFIT, well, actually both HE rounds have a velocity of 690 meters per second, and they both have an HE filler of 37 grams of explosive mass with a TNT equivalent of 57 grams, or damn near if you round it up. So yeah, if you hit a plane with this thing, it's probably going to die. Yeah, so it's a little bit more HE filler than the NS, but for it, of course, you lose a decent amount of your velocity. So overall, if you decide to pick this gun on the 9P or the UT, be my guest. But let's go ahead and go on to the demonstration. So the N37 out in the wild, how is it compared to the NS that came before it? Well, the increased rate of fire is definitely a massive improvement from 260 to 400. That is very, very nice. However, the lower muzzle velocity is kind of a problem. Combine that with the relatively limited ammo load, especially considering you lose rounds compared to the NS-37, at least on the Yak-9T. You're definitely going to miss those extra rounds that you had. The HE filler really doesn't matter all that much. Yes, it does have more, but it's not going to really play that much of a part. This gun still will feel a little bit underwhelming at times, depending on what you're shooting at and what you're hitting, where you're hitting. overall, it is a fairly good gun. You just need to be very, very precise with what limited shots that you get. Fighters generally will die in one hit. Bombers might take a few more. Alright, so now for the last gun in the Russian tech tree, we have the NS-45 45mm cannon. This is only going to be on 4 planes in the entire tech tree. It's going to be on the Yak-9K, the Yak-9UT, the TU-1, and the SU-8. As far as ammo loads go, both of the Yaks have 29 rounds, the TU-1 and the SU-8 have 50. Actually, one other plane I forgot is the Tisma, which also has 50 rounds. So, not a whole lot of airplanes are going to get this gun, and I am also going to please beg you, if you get the Yak-9UT, please do not put this gun in here, because if we look up here at the corner, we have 120 and the 45, and if we go back to the 37, we're going to see that we have 220s, so you lose a 20mm by putting the 45mm gun in this plane. Please don't do that. You don't want to have just one 20mm cannon to back up this shitcake of a gun at 6.0. Now, to go into detail on the belts, which is not really why this gun sucks. The default belt is 2 HE, 1 API, or 1 APT. Air targets is all HE, armor targets is all AP. If you want to load this gun for shooting at tanks, it is pretty good at that. Velocity is 757 meters per second, and the penetration is fairly decent. Air targets, velocity is 780 meters per second, which is fairly decent. A little bit lower than the NS-37, than the NS-37, I should say. But for this kind of a gun, that is not terrible. Explosive mass is 52 grams with 80.08 grams TNT equivalent. So with that, you can kind of see what this gun is meant for. It's meant for killing bombers. And for that, it does fairly well in theory, but before I go into detail on it, let's go ahead and look at it in practice. Yeah, so the NS-45 45mm cannon. Well, I used to really hate this gun just because it used to basically be a shotgun after you fired 3 rounds. Fortunately, Gaijin has buffed that. I don't know when the hell they did it, but they did it at least at some point. However, even with that, I still don't really like this gun. The ballistics can be kind of weird. If you hit something, however, it in theory should die. As you can kind of tell, this thing doesn't really produce the same kind of fireball that you would expect 80 grams of TNT would produce when you hit a plane with it. Of course, these 109s are still dying. However, in practice, this gun is really not as good as you would be led to believe. It's just, it can be kind of unreliable at times. For the most part, it does fairly decently. However, sometimes it can just not do anything. Like, I have a clip of hitting a P-39N 3 times, and it finally died on the 3rd round. So, yeah. Personally, I really still do not like this gun. If you can, just take the 37. It's infinitely better. All right, and that is the end of the Russian guns. So, with all of that done, thank you for sticking around as long as you have. The next video is going to be on the British and the French, and then we're going to do Japan and Sweden after that. So, wrapping this up, we're almost there. Just got 3 more videos left to do, and then we're going to be done. So, hope you stick around and see the rest of those. Otherwise, have a good one.